There is something happening on this planet right now that requires exactly what you were built with. And most of you have spent years treating that thing, that capacity, that sensitivity, that knowing, like it was a problem. And it was never the problem. It was always the point. I want to talk to you today about something that I think most empaths and highly sensitive people have never fully heard. Or if they have heard it, they haven't let themselves believe it yet. You were not born sensitive by accident. You were not given this level of feeling, this degree of perception, this capacity to know things before they're confirmed, to feel what other people are carrying, to walk into a room and read every layer of what's happening within it. You were not given all of that as some kind of cosmic mistake or punishment or design flaw that you're supposed to spend your whole life managing around. You were given it because this specific moment in history needs it. I'm going to say that again because I need you to actually let that sink in. This moment, right now, this decade, this period of extraordinary upheaval and acceleration and collective awakening that we are all living through, this moment specifically needs what empaths carry. Not in spite of the intensity of what's happening, but because of it. And if you've been wondering why your awakening feels so urgent lately, why the gifts are getting louder, why the things that used to work to numb or manage or get through are suddenly not working anymore, why something in you keeps pushing toward the surface no matter how many times you try to push it back down, that's not a malfunction. That's a calling. And today I want to talk about what it actually means to answer it. So let's start by being honest about where we are. We are living through one of the most significant periods of collective transformation in recorded human history. And I don't say that for drama. I say it because it's true. And because most people, even the ones who are awake, even the ones who know that something enormous is happening, are still underestimating the scale of what we're in the middle of. The structures that have organized human life for centuries, the systems of power, systems of meaning, systems of how we understand reality itself, are all in the process of breaking down and reorganizing. And that process is not comfortable. It is not linear. And it is not going to be quick. What we are in the middle of, from an energetic and cosmic perspective, is like an upgrade, a frequency shift. The vibrational baseline of this planet is rising, and everything that cannot hold the higher frequency is coming up for clearing. That's what we've been watching play out collectively, individually, institutionally, in every system that was built on a frequency that no longer matches where we're going. And here's what that means for empaths. We are, by design, sensitive to frequency. You feel frequency shifts before other people do. You pick up on what's underneath the surface of a situation before it becomes visible. You carry within your nervous system a kind of awareness that most people have to work very hard to develop. And for you, and myself, it's just how we're wired. In a time of massive frequency change, that is not a liability. It's a navigational instrument. Think about what it actually means to be able to feel the energy of a situation before it plays out. To know when something is off before you have the evidence. To read the emotional and energetic truth underneath someone's words. to hold space for what someone is carrying without flinching away from the weight of it. In a world that is desperately trying to make sense of what's happening, where people are disoriented and unmoored and looking for something that feels real, the empath's ability to feel what's true is one of the most needed things on the planet right now. But only if you're using it. And that's where most empaths are stuck. I want to talk about something that I've observed in almost every empath I've ever worked with, including myself. There are two distinct phases of the empath's journey, and a lot of us spend most of the time of our lives in the first one without ever making the transition into the second. The first phase is what I call the survival phase. This is where you're primarily focused on managing what you receive, on getting through the day without being completely flattened by the volume of input, on protecting yourself from the environments and people that drain you, on figuring out what's yours and what isn't, and trying to stay functional in the world while you do this. The survival phase is necessary. I want to be very clear about that. The tools that you develop in this phase, the boundaries, the energy hygiene, the ability to identify what's yours, the recognition of your own patterns, that is not wasted time. This is the foundation, and you cannot skip that part. But the survival phase is not the destination. The second phase is what I call the activation phase. The activation phase is where you stop organizing your whole life around managing your sensitivity and start actually using it. Where the gifts stop feeling like something you're working around and start feeling like instruments that you're deliberately playing. Where you stop asking, how do I get through this without it breaking me? And start asking, what is this telling me? And what am I supposed to do with that information? The difference between those two questions is everything. In the survival phase, your sensitivity is something that happens to you. And in the activation phase, your sensitivity is something that you wield. And here's what I notice. The shift from survival to activation doesn't usually happen because someone finally figures out the perfect set of tools. It happens when something inside of the empath finally gives itself permission to stop hiding. Because the survival phase isn't just about managing the input. It's also, underneath all of that, about not being too much. About not making other people uncomfortable with how much you feel. About shrinking the gifts to a size that feels safe to exist within a world that doesn't always make space for them. The activation phase begins the moment you decide you're done with that particular compromise. I want to get into something that I think is really important and that I don't hear talked about enough in the empath and lightworker space. Why are so many empaths waking up right now? Why is the urgency so high? Why does it feel for so many sensitive people like something has shifted in the last few years? Like the volume got turned up, the gifts got louder, like the old ways of managing has stopped working. Part of the answer is astrological. We are in an extraordinary period of celestial activations. Jupiter is in Leo right now, which is the energy of full, visible, unapologetic presence, of showing up and being seen in your full power, of the gifts coming into the light rather than staying in the private space where it was safe to develop them. Neptune is stationing retrograde, which means the fog is lifting. The stories we've been telling ourselves about why it's not time yet, why we're not yet ready, why someone else gets to do this work, but maybe not us. Neptune retrograde dismantles those stories. It makes the truth harder to look away from. Mercury is also in retrograde in Cancer, which means the emotional body is asking to be heard before the strategic mind takes over. For empaths, whose primary mode of processing is emotional and somatic and intuitive, this is actually a gift. This is your native language being spoken by the sky. But beyond the astrology, there's something larger happening. The collective is in pain. And I mean that very literally. The emotional body of humanity is in acute distress right now. People are confused and frightened and looking for something real to anchor onto. And in that environment, the empath's ability to feel what's actually true, to cut through the noise and the performance and the surface presentation and connect to what's real underneath, is desperately needed. This is not the time for empaths to quietly manage in the background. This is the time for empaths to be using their gifts in the world. And I want to be specific about what came through and what that means, because I think there's a version of using your gifts that sounds abstract and overwhelming. And I want to bring it down to something concrete. Using your gifts on purpose does not necessarily mean starting a healing practice or becoming a public figure or channeling for the collective on a YouTube channel. For some of you, it does mean that. But for others, it means something much more immediate and human. It means the friend who calls you at 2 a.m. because you're the one who actually knows how to hold space for them. It means the coworker who keeps finding their way to your desk because they can feel that you see them. It means the family member whose life keeps shifting in the direction of healing because you've been holding a vision of their wholeness even when they couldn't hold it themselves. It means the stranger in the grocery store who you've exchanged maybe 12 words with and left them feeling inexplicably better. Empaths are doing this all the time anyway. The question is whether you're doing it consciously, with intention, with boundaries, with your own field clear and your gifts actually pointed, or whether you're doing it accidentally while slowly depleting yourself. The difference between those two versions of the same gift is what this video is all about, what this channeled message is all about. Let me get into the mechanics of this, because I think empaths here use your gifts and they're not always sure what that means in practice. So they want me to break this down for you. The first thing that changes when you move into intentional use of your gifts is that you stop receiving passively and start receiving with awareness. What I mean by that is this. Most empaths in the survival phase are picking up everything in their environment. The emotions, the energy, the unspoken dynamics, without any filter or framework. It just comes in, all of it, all the time. And because it's coming in without any direction, it tends to just pile up in your system until you're exhausted and overwhelmed and not sure what belongs to you and what doesn't. When you start using your gifts on purpose, you bring intention to that receiving. You learn to ask specific questions of your sensitivity rather than just letting it absorb everything indiscriminately. You develop what I think of as a directed channel, the ability to focus your perception towards something specific, receive information about it, and then close it back down when you're done. This is actually a learnable skill. I know it might sound mystical maybe, but the mechanics of this is not different from learning to focus your attention on a specific sound in a noisy room. You're working with the same perceptual capacity. You're just adding direction and intention to it. The second thing that changes is that you develop the ability to work with what you receive rather than just trying to survive it. Most empaths have an experience of picking up on something, whether that's an emotion in a room, the energy of a difficult person, or even the weight of a collective movement. And the primary response is to either absorb it until it becomes their own burden, or to try to shut down the receiving to protect themselves. All understandable. But when you're using your gifts on purpose, there's a third option. You can receive the information, acknowledge what it is, and then decide what to do with it. You can hold it without taking it on. You can be present to it without being consumed by it. This is what we call the witness position. The ability to feel something fully, to let it be real, to not minimize or bypass it, while simultaneously remaining anchored in your own field. Present without being merged, feeling without drowning in it. That is the difference between an empath who is depleted and an empath who is effective. The third thing that changes is that you start to understand the difference between your role and everyone else's. One of the most common patterns that I see in empaths that I work with, and one that I lived through myself for many years, is the belief that you can feel someone else's pain. That means you're responsible for fixing it. That the perception creates the obligation. That being able to sense what someone needs means that you're supposed to meet that need, no matter what it costs you. And this is one of the most exhausting and ultimately unsustainable beliefs that an empath can hold. Your gifts are perceptual. They show you what's true. They allow you to hold space with extraordinary depth. They let you see people in their fullness in a way that's genuinely healing for the people that you work with. But perception is not the same as responsibility. You can see what someone needs without it being your job to provide it. You can hold space for someone's pain without taking it into your own body. You can be a clear, loving, fully present witness to someone's experience without absorbing the experience as your own. And when empaths learn to make this distinction, when they separate the gift of perception from the assumption that they have the obligation to fix it, something extraordinary happens. The gifts actually get stronger because they're no longer being used as a kind of indiscriminate emergency response system. They're being used with intention, with discernment, with appropriate boundaries, and with the understanding that your job is not to save everyone, but to be genuinely fully present with the ones you're actually here to serve. Now they want me to go somewhere bigger with this, so just stay with me. There is a dimension to the empath's role that most of us don't talk about. And I think that's partly because it sounds grandiose, and empaths are often very uncomfortable with anything that sounds grandiose. We're more comfortable being useful than being significant. We'd rather serve quietly than claim that what we do matters on a larger scale. But I want to challenge that particular form of smallness, because I think it's costing us and costing the collective something very real. Empaths are not just sensitive people who have a hard time in grocery stores. We're also a part of a specific function in the human energy system. And that function is more important right now than it has been at almost any other point in our history. And here's what I mean. Every ecosystem has organisms that are highly sensitive to changes in their environment, that register disturbances before they become visible to the larger system. For example, in nature, we have keystone species, indicator species, the creatures whose behavior tells us what's happening in the ecosystem before that data shows up in our scientific instruments. Well, empaths serve a similar function in the human collective. We are the ones who feel the shift before it's measurable, who know something is changing in the emotional or energetic field of a situation before there's external evidence to confirm it, who carry in their nervous system a kind of collective barometer, registering what the collective body is feeling, processing, needing, or moving through. And in a time of massive collective transition, which is exactly what we're in the middle of right now, that function is essential. But here's the thing about those indicator species. They only serve their function when they're healthy, when their own system is clear and regulated and resourced. A sensitive organism that is overwhelmed and dysregulated does not give you clean data. It gives you noise. This is why the inner work that empaths do, the energy clearing, the regulation, the boundary work, the ongoing practice of understanding your own energy system, is not just personal healing. It is for collective service. Every time an empath does the work to clear their field, they become a cleaner transmitter. Every time an empath learns to hold their own frequency in a dysregulated environment, they introduce coherence into that environment. Every time an empath uses their gifts with intention, rather than just surviving them, they become a resource for the people and situations around them, rather than a sponge for what needs to be processed. So you being well is not selfish. You being well and taking care of yourself is part of the work. And the work right now is enormous. I want to bring this back to the present moment, specifically to what's happening astrologically right now, because I think it's directly relevant to why so many empaths are feeling this call so urgently at this particular time. Jupiter entered Leo at the end of June and will be here through mid-2027. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, abundance, higher truth, and where we are being asked to grow. And in Leo, all of that energy is directed toward visibility, self-expression, leadership, and the willingness to be fully, unapologetically seen. For empaths, who often live in the tension between having significant gifts and being deeply uncomfortable with being seen, this is one of the most challenging and most important transits of this decade. Because Jupiter in Leo is not asking you to become someone different. It's asking you to stop hiding the version of you that already exists. The gifts that you've developed quietly, in private, over years of inner work and healing, and accumulation of wisdom. Jupiter in Leo is asking you to bring those into the light. Not to perform them, not to prove them, just to stop concealing them. And I think a lot of empaths are feeling this as a kind of pressure that they don't have language for yet, like something is pushing from the inside, like the version of themselves that they've been keeping safe is trying to come out. And that's not anxiety. That's not ego. That's Jupiter doing exactly what Jupiter is supposed to do. Expanding you beyond the size that you've been willing to inhabit. The question Jupiter in Leo is asking every empath right now is not, are you ready? It's asking, are you willing? Because readiness is a myth. Nobody ever feels fully ready. The empaths who are doing the most powerful, most meaningful, most impactful work right now are not the ones who finally got comfortable enough. They're the ones who decided that the work was too important to wait until comfort arrived. I want to close this part of the conversation with something specific, because I think a lot of empaths know on some level that they're being called towards something. And I think a lot of them are also very good at finding reasons why now is not the time. So I want to talk about what actually changes when you say yes. When you make the choice, even if you're scared, even if you're not sure, even if the old fear in your body is still very much present. Saying yes and making the choice to start using your gifts with intention. The first thing that changes is the exhaustion. This might seem counterintuitive. You might expect that doing more with your gifts would be more exhausting. But what I found in my own personal experience and in working with empaths for years is that the exhaustion of the survival phase is not primarily caused by how much you're feeling. It's caused by the friction and resistance of feeling things you're not using. When you start using your gifts on purpose, when the receiving has direction, when the perception has an outlet, when you understand that what you're picking up and you know what to do with it, a significant portion of that chronic soul fatigue and exhaustion starts to lift. Because the energy is moving. It's not just accumulating in your field. The second thing that changes is the loneliness. Oh, the loneliness. Most of us carry a deep, specific loneliness. The feeling everything, feeling all the things, everything that other people don't seem to feel. Of knowing things that other people don't seem to know. Of existing at a level of depth and intensity that can feel very isolating, especially when you're in environments that don't have language for it. When you start using your gifts on purpose, when you find your people, when you enter into spaces where that depth is welcome, when you do work that actually requires what you carry, that loneliness begins to dissolve because you're finally in the right rooms. The third thing that changes is your sense of purpose. One of the most consistent things I hear from empaths who have been in the survival phase for a long time is a kind of low-level despair about meaning. If this gift is just making me miserable, if all it does is make me feel everything and get drained and overwhelmed, then what's the point of it? When you move into intentional use of your gifts, that question gets answered. Not in an abstract spiritual way, but in a concrete felt and lived way. You start to see the impact. The person whose session cracked something open. The conversation that shifted something big. The presence you brought to a situation that changed the quality of what happened there. You start to have direct evidence that what you carry is real and that it matters. And that is one of the most profound experiences available to a human being. The experience of being exactly what that moment requires. I want to close this video with something I'm going to receive rather than think my way into. So I'm going to take a deep breath here and drop fully into channel. And let's see what wants to come through for you. You have been preparing for a long time. Longer than this lifetime in most cases. The sensitivity that you carry, the capacity to feel what others cannot, to know what is not yet visible, to hold the energetic weight of what is real, even when reality is not yet ready to confirm it. That was not given to you in this incarnation. It was brought here with you, refined here, tested here, and it is ready now. We want to speak to the part of you that is still waiting for the permission that will never come from outside you. Still waiting to feel ready enough, healed enough, certain enough. Still waiting for someone or something to confirm that what you carry is real before you trust it fully. Well, that confirmation is not coming. Not because it isn't true. It is true, more true than you have yet allowed yourself to believe. But because the confirmation can only come from within. From the moment you trust what you know before it's proven. From the moment you act on the knowing before you have the evidence. From the moment you stop asking if you're allowed and simply begin. The world does not need a quieter version of you. The world does not need you to take and make yourself more manageable, more palatable, more acceptable to the ones who are not yet awake enough to receive what you carry. The world needs the full version of you. The one that feels everything and uses it. The one that knows and acts. The one that is tired of surviving and ready to serve from a place of genuine, rooted, embodied power. That version of you is not somewhere in the future. It is already here. It has always been here. It has just been waiting, patiently, persistently, for you to stop apologizing for it and to let it take the lead. This is the moment. Not because everything is ready. Not because it will be easy. Not because the fear will be gone. Because you are. If this landed for you, if something in this video felt like something you already knew but needed to hear out loud, I want you to know that this is exactly the work that I do. I work with empaths and highly sensitive people who are ready to make the shift from survival to activation, from managing their gifts to using them. Through Akashic Records readings, one-on-one sessions, and my signature 14-step program, the Self-Spirit Method, which is built specifically for the way that empath nervous systems process and integrate change. I have all the links in the episode description. If you want to work together, if you're ready to take that leap forward and need some help, this is a good place to start. And if this video resonated for you, please share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And I'm not telling you that to increase my numbers or visibility or anything like that, but because there is someone in your life who needs to hear this. There are so many people who need to hear this, who is somewhere in their own survival phase wondering when it gets to be different. Send this to them. Let them hear how great they are and how much their gifts are needed. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. I'm here every week with content specifically for empaths and sensitive people navigating through this awakening process. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.